Thank you for joining me today. I am excited to be here with you. My name is Deanne, and I am a Unit Study Pro, and I am here today to share a few tips to help you release your inner Unit Study Pro. You may be curious why this workshop is called Unit Study Pro 2.0. What makes it 2.0? Since I recorded the Unit Study Pro workshop in 2012, a lot has changed. For example, when I began creating unit studies with my children, the library and Netflix videos were my primary resources. Not to age myself, but this is when Netflix videos were sent in the mail and not streamed. Today, all you need is a good internet connection and web browser. Yes, many of us still prefer to use actual books from the library, but the reality is there are free or nearly free resources available at your fingertips. In our video today, I will spend a few minutes talking about definitions and what it takes to be a Unit Study Pro. I will also walk you through the Titanic unit study I created for my son following the pro tips. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. First, let's define a few terms you may have heard. Sometimes these words are used interchangeably, but are they the same? Let's take a look at topical studies, conceptual studies, theme-based studies, thematic studies, unit studies, delight-directed studies, and strewing. Topical and conceptual studies are essentially the same type of study, and the names can be used interchangeably. The conceptual or topical study takes one specific topic within a subject and dives into it deeply. There are some prepared topical studies you may have heard of. For example, the Apologia Young Explorers textbooks or the Gravitas Focus on Science series. Setting it apart from the unit study, the topical or conceptual study narrows the topic. For example, your family is doing a unit study on modern U.S. history. Your children are fascinated with the Civil War. Being an adventurous homeschool mom, you and your family take a rabbit trail into the Civil War and spend 2 to 3 months studying the different historical perspectives and the impact of the war. The focus is to feed your children's interest by expanding the historical significance of the Civil War. Other subjects may be covered briefly, but the primary focus is the specific area that your children want to study more deeply. Wrapping up the focus area, you would move forward and resume your modern U.S. history studies. Next, you may have heard theme-based or thematic studies to describe a unit study. These terms describe the same type of study. The unit study is defined as a thematic or topical approach to teaching, as opposed to the traditional individual subject approach. In other words, rather than teaching each subject separately, a unit study integrates subjects into a unified study centering on a specific event, person, or subject. With the unit study approach, language arts, science and health, history, applied mathematics, art, and music are well covered as they relate to the topic. You will need to add a math curriculum and a reading and phonics or English language arts curriculum for more systematic instruction. Unit studies can be created or purchased in most areas of interest. Most unit studies will center on history or literature, with the other subjects taught as they relate. For example, the Prairie Primer is a literature-based unit study that centers on each of the 9 books in the Little House on the Prairie book series. Science, history, vocabulary, music, and art, as well as health and nutrition, are taught as they relate to the Little House book that is being studied. The unit study approach has proven benefits for children and parents. Let's look at the benefits for children first. Research has shown that children are able to learn more effectively and have a better retention when topics are tied together with a theme. Unit studies also teach all learning styles, auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, meeting the needs of different learners. Additionally, unit studies create excitement in children and lead them to want to share with others, which takes learning to the next level. As they share, they teach. As they teach, they take ownership of the knowledge. Finally, unit studies encourage the use of imagination, creativity, and thinking skills. But what about the benefits to the parent or the teacher? Unit studies are multi-level, which means all children learn together. This saves time from teaching individual subjects to children one-on-one, with the exception of math and your language arts or your phonics and reading. Interestingly, it has been shown that families learning together and doing activities together often develop closer relationships with one another. Creating your own unit study is cost-effective, as many resources are available free or for a nominal price. You also save money by not investing in specific grade-level curriculum in every subject area. Finally, you can be more organized. You will typically find that with the unit studies, it takes less time to study the topic with all of your children together, compared to teaching each child 5 different subjects at several different grade levels. But there are some negative aspects to the unit study approach we should consider as well. First is the prep time. Preparing and planning a unit study takes time. Yes, you will get this time back during the day-to-day teaching. I do want to mention that there are prepared unit studies available for purchase. This may be an excellent option if you are new to unit studies and want to find your groove before creating your own. Purchasing a prepared unit study saves time because the work is done for you. However, prepared studies are more expensive than creating your own. Secondly, unit studies do not follow a traditional scope and sequence or meet state standards. This can be an issue if your state requires mandated testing. I would encourage you not to let this deter you from the unit study approach if you feel it is a good fit for your family. There are numerous supplemental standards-based workbooks that can be used to meet standards. You may also face child resistance. Let me explain. If you have a child passionate about a subject, say the Titanic, but another one is eye-rolling and whining, you have a decision to make. Do you force the eye roller to join the festivities or create multiple unit studies? That is only a decision you can make as a family. For my family, we would switch topics. One child would pick a topic to study for, say, 4 to 6 weeks, then another child. Everyone studied together with good attitudes, or they lost their turn at choosing a topic. The final potential negative, especially if you create your own study, is knowing how long to study a topic. I recommend picking a time frame and sticking as close to it as possible. While it is rare for a topic to end earlier, it is common for a unit study to gain a life of its own. If this happens and your children agree, give yourself permission to keep going forward. However, if you have a less enthusiastic learner, you may wish to move to the next topic while allowing the interested child to continue learning on his own. Before we dive into becoming a unit study pro, there are a couple of other terms I would like to quickly define that are often tossed about within the context of unit studies. First is delight directed. Simply defined, children are given the freedom to follow their natural curiosity and passions in the educational journey. There are 2 common paths to delight directed learning. The first is referred to as unschooling. In the strictest definition, unschooling means mom and dad are hands off. A child sets the tone, the schedule, and the plan for their learning. This may be successful for a season, but many find that children need more guidance, which leads to the second path. The second path of delight-directed learning involves a parent supporting and guiding a child into learning topics of interest. As a parent, you're hands-on, and you help them find appropriate books and videos on a topic. This path provides a directed, somewhat structured study into an area of interest. With this path, as a parent-teacher, you recognize that there are still things that must be learned in a systematic way, like math and reading. Another term you may hear is strewing. Popular in families that follow delight-directed learning, especially those on the unschooling path, strewing is the scattering of objects throughout the child's environment for him or her to discover. Educational books, games, art supplies, magnets, science kits, rocks, the sky is the limit for strewing. These can be any item. Simply pick a topic or an activity that you would like to introduce to your children. In The Art of Strewing, the author points out, quote, "Strewing is different than most interest-led learning methods. It does not require or expect anything from the child. It suggests, invites, and entices." End quote. The goal is to enrich and introduce. As parents, you do not force a child to interact with the item. If they pick up the item and explore it, you have succeeded in planting seeds for further learning. In purest terms, delight-directed learning and strewing are not interrelated to the unit study. However, both can be used as catalysts for going deeper into the topic by creating a unit study. For example, it was at the age of 4 my son became interested in the Titanic. Due to his young age, I began finding age-appropriate first readers, science kits, and toys related to the Titanic and boats, with the goal of just feeding his interest. As he grew older, he continued to be passionate about the topic, and by late elementary, I had developed a multi-year unit study around the Titanic. Although strewing was not popular during my homeschool journey, I did similar types of things. Frequenting local library sales, I often purchased large coffee-style books or colorful children's encyclopedias. I would lay these out for my children to discover. I also kept various art supplies easily accessible so my children could freely create whenever inspired. But now let's take a look at what it takes to be a unit study pro. Every one of us are capable of being a pro with unit study. The secret is found in 3 simple steps. P, plan your topic. R, research your topic. And O, organize your topic. Let's spend a few minutes and go through these steps. There is a handout with this video. Feel free to print this off and use the brainstorming and planning pages. These are also available as a template for you to use in planning your own unit studies. The first step in becoming a unit study pro is P, pick your topic. When picking a topic, you will want to consider the following. First, the ages of your children. You want to make sure the unit study you select is age appropriate. When planning a unit study, it is important to teach to the oldest child. Younger children come alongside the oldest and learn while the oldest is being challenged. This is also an opportunity for your oldest child to take what they are learning and explain it to their younger siblings, which solidifies their learning. Second, consider their interest. When you select a topic, find one that interests children and parents. If children are interested in a topic and want to learn about it, they will be more engaged in the learning process. This is true for mom or dad as well. The topic must have some appeal. Otherwise, we won't take the time to create the study or make sure we get to it every day. Finally, consider your family dynamics. This includes things like how many children you have. Unit studies are typically designed for group learning and activities. It is possible to do a unit study with one child, but as a parent, you will need to be more involved in the learning activities. Life situations should be considered, like health issues, because they have an impact on your unit study, the health of your children, and your personal health. Early in our unit study days, my daughter broke her arm. We tried to continue our study, but found it was too labor-intensive for me to do the projects and writing exercises in my daughter's place while also working with a younger child. Mom or dad's health is also a factor. Organizing, coordinating, and overseeing a unit study takes time and energy that may not be available if you have health issues. The next step in becoming a unit study pro is R, research your topic. This is where you take the topic that you have chosen for your family and you find available resources. For most of us, the internet will be our #1 place to go for information. You may also want to visit your local library. We found our children's librarian to be a valuable asset in planning resources for the studies. Also, be sure to take advantage of your own bookshelves. Most homeschoolers have numerous resources at their fingertips. These are often overlooked while in the throes of planning. During the research phase, you will also want to look for local opportunities for field trips that will tie into your unit study. For example, in our area, we have zoos and a wildlife park, the Abraham Lincoln Museum, and a paddle wheel boat. But also consider finding people resources to lend experience or credibility to the topic. Talk to homeschooling friends, people at church, and your local librarian. The goal is to connect your children with someone in your community who has personal experience or knowledge about the topic. During our unit study days, my children interviewed a World War II veteran during our history studies, as well as our local county coroner when they both became interested in crime science. And yes, that is one short unit study I created to feed their interests. Our final step is organize your topic. This is the third step in becoming a unit study pro. This is where you take your research and all the great ideas that you have and you organize them. You select the books, the videos, the websites that you want to use. You determine your activities and schedule your field trips. Contact knowledgeable people in your community and set a time for your children to meet them for an age-appropriate interview. Younger children can simply listen as the person shares their story. Older ones may wish to be prepared with a list of questions they would like to ask. Now that you know the steps necessary to create your own unit study, Let's walk through one together. I chose the Titanic for this demonstration as it is one that I created for my son. But here's a fun fact. My original plan and intent was a 1-month-long study. However, my son became so passionate about the Titanic that this study lasted 2 years. Actually much longer, as he continued to pursue learning about the Titanic on his own throughout his teen years. I always found it exciting to watch my children become independent and self-directed learners as they pursued topics that interested them. But for this part, we will use the unit study tools and topic templates from the handout. The tools page provides a place to brainstorm, and the topic page is the place to organize your study. On the tools page, our topic, the Titanic, is in the center circle. Let's start with websites on the left, and here are a few to get you started. National Geographic's Remembering the Titanic is great for older teens and adults. National Geographic also offers a Nat Geo for Kids site with more age-appropriate content for younger ones. Kids Discover magazine has an online digital magazine. At the time of this recording, if you create an account, you have access to free vocabulary resources and lesson plans. Lastly, Titanic.com offers numerous biographies, a timeline, and other great resources. Next, let's consider videos in YouTube. Let's be honest, YouTube offers an amazing resource of free videos. As a parent, I would preview the video before my children. Not all are created equal. Additionally, Netflix and Amazon Prime and the library are all still excellent resources. You may wish to introduce or conclude your study by watching one of the Titanic movies. Most of us are familiar with the 1997 Titanic from James Cameron, and this may be an option if you feel it is age appropriate. There are other options, including the 1953 version of the movie Titanic with Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Wagner, or the 1958 movie A Night to Remember that focuses on the last evening aboard the Titanic. You will discover that documentaries abound from the History Channel and National Geographic. These will cover everything from the historical facts to the search of the ocean bottom for the Titanic and even recovery of artifacts. You will find numerous free videos on YouTube. But let's quickly consider book options. You will find books written for every age group from preschool to adulthood. Sometimes it is hard to weed through these options. The greatest consideration is to make sure the book is age appropriate, especially when dealing with a difficult topic like the Titanic. Additionally, children may want to read about icebergs and glaciers, ships and shipbuilding, and even survivor biographies or excerpts. As our Titanic unit study expanded, we also learned about Samuel Morse, the inventor of Morse code, which was the wireless communication used aboard the ship. On the right side of the Unit Study Tools page in the handout, you will see the Activities box. Hopefully your mind is already swirling with ideas based on the websites, videos, and books mentioned previously. Here are some activities that my children enjoyed. Learning Morse code. We spent a day communicating only in Morse code, either by writing or tapping our fingers with long or short taps. Trivia time. It's typically thought that SOS means save our ship, but it actually doesn't mean anything. SOS is commonly used as a distress call because it is easy to tap out the 3 short, the 3 long, and the 3 short taps during an emergency. The distress call in 1912 was CQD, which stands for Come Quick, Distress. But it was very difficult to type out during a crisis. Other activities we enjoyed was mapping the route of the Titanic, studying the parts of a ship. I had my children draw and diagram the ship. We also studied ship speed, icebergs and glaciers, and hypothermia. We created a timeline and studied the culture and styles of clothes from 1912. The next area we want to consider are field trips. Take a moment and think of Titanic-related field trips that would be readily available to your family. Since my son was so passionate about the Titanic, we made a 9-hour drive to visit a traveling Titanic exhibit at a children's museum. Thankfully, times have changed. There are now 3 museums in the U.S. dedicated to the Titanic, and other museums still offer touring exhibits like we attended. A quick Google search will show opportunities in your area. But also be sure to check out the free educational information at the Titanic Branson or Titanic Pigeon Forge websites. The free guides provide teaching suggestions in language arts, social studies, science, math, as well as religious heroes and scripture lessons. If you live near the ocean or other water source, take your children to the waterfront when the weather and water temperature is cooler. Have them wade in the water to experience what the cold ocean may have felt like. Do you live near a U.S. Coast Guard station? See if you can schedule a tour and learn about water rescues. If they have an ice patrol, learn more about their mission to monitor iceberg danger and provide relevant iceberg warnings to the maritime community. The Ice Patrol Service was created in response to the Titanic disaster. Next, look at people resources. This may be a bit more challenging to find since there are no longer any living survivors of the Titanic. There are numerous interviews on YouTube, however. Here are a couple of ideas to narrow the options. First, search for interviews with Molly Brown, Eva Hart, Melvina Dean, Violet Jessup, and Frank Prentice. These survivors were interviewed numerous times. There is also a short video on YouTube called Titanic Survivors, Eye-Opening Stories from Real Survivors, from T&H Inspiration and Motivation. You may also wish to interview a Coast Guard or Navy service personnel. Ask them about life on a ship. But now that your brainstorming list is complete, unless you have an absolute passion to study the Titanic, it's time to narrow the list. Now is the time to review all the ideas and determine which will work best for your family. It's important to remember that just because you have a great brainstorming idea, you do not have to use it in your unit study. The planning page is where we take all these great ideas and we break them down into our plan of what we want to accomplish with the study. The goal is to break these into subject areas to make it easier to document learning. Let's start with spelling and vocabulary. Using one or more of the preferred books or websites, choose age-appropriate words. Younger children can learn glacier terminology like icebergs, ice fields, ice caps, ice sheets, and even types of icebergs. Introduce nautical terms like stern, knot, port, hull, mast, and so on. If you study hypothermia, have children learn the definitions of temperature, frostbite, lethargy, and shivering. Penmanship is a wonderful way to encourage your children to create their own notebook. Have them copy a passage from a book or a quote from a survivor. This is also an excellent place to include related Bible verses. Here is a sample quote from Titanic survivor Colonel Archibald Gracie, as well as Song of Solomon 8:7, which is engraved on the memorial monument of Mr. and Mrs. Isidore Straus, who chose to perish together aboard the Titanic. Additionally, though, plan writing assignments for your children. Depending on the unit study, the writing assignment should be topically and skills appropriate. In our example of the Titanic, there are some aspects of this study that may be inappropriate for youngers. You decide how much depth of topic to pursue based on the emotional and chronological age of your children. Ideas for writing assignments include creating a notebook on various Titanic passengers and crew members. Include photos and quotes or biographical summaries. You can also have your children do age-appropriate research projects. For example, younger children can research how the Titanic was built or become a newspaper reporter and create a headline and short article about the maiden journey of the Titanic, or summarize the ship's sinking and rescue efforts. There are ways to challenge your older children's research skills. For example, they can research first, second, and third class distinctions aboard the ship. How did their accommodations differ? Was there a difference in how they were treated? You could also have them research how class distinctions impacted survival rates. Finally, take time to compare and contrast one of the Titanic movies to the real events they have studied. This can be an essay or a family discussion to include all ages. Wrapping up language arts is literature and reading comprehension. Write a book report on one of the reading selections. Older children can take this to the next level and write an informative speech to present to family. With your youngest children, incorporate the Charlotte Mason techniques of narration and dictation. Let's look at things to do for music and art. Children can draw and label a picture of the Titanic in art class. For music, study the life of bandleader Wallace Hartley, who chose to remain with several of his band members on the deck of the Titanic as it sank. Interestingly, it has been suggested that Nearer My God to Thee is the last song he conducted as the ship sank. Have your children listen to the song and analyze if it was a fitting choice as the boat went down. For physical education, you may want to be a little creative as a way to help children understand the topic. For example, in a study of the Titanic, if you live near water, row a boat or a canoe 1 knot. If not near water, take a walk the same distance. You can also introduce water safety through swim or lifeguarding classes. If you studied hypothermia, teach children large muscle exercises, which have been shown to warm the core temperature of the body. For example, jumping jacks, high knees, and skipping. Next is social studies, history, and geography as our next subject category. When you plan a unit study, social studies, history, and geography are usually the easiest things to pull together. In fact, often you may find it necessary to cut some activities out of these areas to have a balanced unit study. Here are a few things that we did for history in our Titanic study. We created a timeline from the late 1800s to 1920. We also incorporated mapping activities, including where the Titanic was built, where the Titanic sailed from, and its final destination. But we also included where the Titanic hit the iceberg and where it sank. This is a great opportunity for older kids to learn how to use latitude and longitude. Another activity we did was study clothing styles and culture of the early 1900s. We read biographies, for example, stories about Mr. and Mrs. Isidore Straus, who died together on the Titanic. Also, the captain of the Titanic, Captain John Smith, and Major Archibald Butt, a military aide to President Taft, just to name a few. Next, let's look at science ideas. Like the social studies category, science topics are abundant. You will need to narrow the field to fit your family dynamics. Here are some things you can do. Study glaciers. Include activities like melting ice cubes and graph how long it takes to melt. Check the ice cube every 5 or 10 minutes and have younger children graph the size of the ice cube. Or you could do a related experiment to find out what freezes faster, salt water or fresh water. Another interesting science topic to study is hypothermia. Teach your children symptoms and treatment, and more importantly, teach them how to prevent it. But let's move on to math activities. There are numerous practical math activities you can do to complement the math curriculum you are using. For example, calculate the Titanic's speed and how far she sailed before hitting the iceberg. Learn how to convert knots to miles per hour. Older children can research the number of lifeboats and their seating capacity compared to the number of people on board. What is the percentage of people without an option for survival? Children can calculate the number of lifeboats that would have been necessary for everyone to survive. Introduce statistics to older children. If there were 1,523 people who drowned and 705 survivors, what was the total number on board? What percentage survived? Go to the next level and determine the ratio of women to men that survived. Finally, let's consider Bible and life lessons. Determine the life and scripture lessons you would like your children to learn. In our example unit study of the Titanic, there are numerous options. Here are a few ideas to get you started. Study the leadership of Titanic's captain John Smith. Research and discuss whether he was a good leader. Defend your position. Study pride from a secular and religious perspective. It has been reported that the Titanic's designers boasted God himself could not sink this ship. Evaluate this statement. If you would like to add in scripture for copy work or study, here are a few to get you started. Congratulations! You have just planned a unit study. The only step that is left is transitioning your planning page into daily activities and choosing your resources. The daily activity step is often the most fun step because it's where you see your great ideas take on life. For us, it worked best to create weekly goals, as our unit study plans often developed a life of their own. Having a weekly goal kept us moving forward while at the same time giving us flexibility to go deeper and really enjoy the subject matter. As a more natural way of learning, the unit study does not provide tests or worksheets to document learning. As you work through your study, there are numerous things you can do to document learning. Create a notebook or portfolio with your timeline. Written work, for example, the copy work or your research papers. Did you interview someone with experience? Have your children write a summary of the interview for the notebook or portfolio. If you take field trips, add photographs or mementos to your notebook. Have your children write a summary of what they learned or how they felt. If your family is more artistic, include drawings or create a diorama. We also had our older children prepare and present a 5 to 10 minute speech for extended family about the study. We tied this with preparing an authentic meal. There are numerous ways to evaluate and document learning. Find one that fits your family. There are some older unit study resource books available, although most are out of print now. You can check your local library or use websites for these resources. I hope this sample unit study has been helpful. I also invite you to check out the brief unit studies on our homeschool forum. These are designed to introduce unit studies as a learning method to your family. They may also provide a starting point for a topic of interest. Use them to go deeper into your children's interests. Thank you for joining me today. The team of consultants at Rainbow Resource Center would be happy to help you with any curriculum or homeschooling questions. You can reach us at 888-841-3456, email us at consultants@rainbowresource.com, or live chat with us via the website during our regular business hours.